The Pharisees and Sadducees were the religious leaders in Jesus' time. Or were they? Hello, I'm Kathy Bartow. Today's video talks about Jesus' remarks to these religious leaders during his final ministry in Jerusalem. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were religious in name only. Jesus condemned them in his 7 woes that appear in Matthew chapter 23, verses 13 through 36. Jesus was not what they expected. They believed their Messiah was to be a military force and not a humble servant. So they plotted for his demise, which resulted in Jesus' death on the cross. Remember that this was all part of God's plan. Jesus knew that he came to earth to be a final blood sacrifice for the sins of mankind. Let's look at both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, each of which were prominent Jewish groups with distinct beliefs and practices. The Pharisees were mostly from the middle class, but some were from the upper class. They believed in the authority of the written Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, which were written by Moses, along with the oral traditions of the elders. This was the oral interpretations of the Mosaic law. They believed in the resurrection, the existence of angels and spirits, and the coming of a Messiah. They adhered to interpretations and practices of the law based on the traditions of the elders. Some, like Paul, were initially Pharisees, but later became followers of Jesus. Others were critical of Jesus and his teachings, viewing him as a threat to their authority and to their traditions. Jesus criticized them for their hypocrisy and legalism. Now, the Sadducees were primarily from the priestly aristocracy and the wealthy upper class. They adhered strictly to the written Torah and denied the authority of oral traditions. They denied the existence of angels and spirits, the resurrection of the dead, and the afterlife. They focused on the temple and its rituals. The Sadducees were often in conflict with Jesus, questioning his authority and his teachings about the afterlife and the Messiah. Jesus criticized them for their materialism and denial of the afterlife. Remember that it was the religious leaders who called for Jesus' death. Judas, the disciple who betrayed Jesus, made a deal with the chief priests to arrest Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. The arrest led immediately to his trial before the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish Supreme Court and legislative body that was comprised of 71 Pharisees and Sadducees. The Sanhedrin condemned Jesus to death and handed him to Pontius Pilate. These religious leaders often preached a certain standard of righteousness, but did not live up to it themselves. The Pharisees and Sadducees agreed on one main point. They opposed Jesus for several reasons. Among them include Jesus challenged their interpretations of Mosaic law. Jesus exposed their hypocrisy. They believed that Jesus was a threat to their authority and to their power. They also didn't believe that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah because they were expecting a military leader, not a suffering servant. Listen as I read Matthew chapter 23. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works that they do, for they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make the phylacteries broad and their fringes long. And they love the place of honors at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by others. But they are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father, who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, then the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. The 7 woes emphasize the contrast between the outward religious practices and inner spiritual reality. Jesus' pronouncements demonstrate that true righteousness comes from a changed heart, not just outward conformity to religious rules. Till next time, peace be with you.